Hello and welcome to episode 77 of A Gamer Looks at 40. I'm Bill Tucker, and today is one of my favorite types of episodes. It's one of those that allows me to bring a lot of different voices to the show and a lot of different topics. Side quests, volume 6. This is going to be an interesting one because usually I do the side quests after I've done a host of interviews, kind of after a series. Exactly kind of what I did with Zelda. I did Zelda side quests and that kind of eased everything in. But this time around, I'm doing this with a mix. Some of these people you've heard multiple times in the show. Some of these people you've never heard before because I just did their interview last week for the Earthbound episode or for Final Fantasy. So this is going to be a really special one because you're going to meet some people on the show that you're going to be hearing over and over again, some new voices that I'm super excited to bring on board today. So without further ado, let's jump into Side Quest Volume 6, starting with Jim from Drink a Beer Plays a Game as we talk about Breath of the Wild and a really sweet story that he shares about it. And oh yeah, we're back at Zelda. Zelda is never going to leave this show. We are back in Zelda world. I have 5 more clips of Zelda. I don't even know why they didn't end up elsewhere, but here they are for your listening enjoyment. So Zelda, Jim from Drink a Beer Plays a Game talks about a sweet story about Zelda and his newborn. Moses from the Well-Read Mage and thepixels.com. He comes on to talk about Breath of the Wild and some of the differences between favorite and best. Again, I love those conversations. And then Mike Albertin of Games My Mom Found comes on to talk a bit more about why Zelda games are all kind of the same.
So I'm kind of weird when it comes to my collecting. So I was buying into the hype train for Breath of the Wild like crazy.
Right.
So, and it was like, oh, new system's coming out. So new system, new game. Of course, but it's also coming out in the old system that already has a library. So, of course, instead of buying a Switch, that's when I decided to buy a Wii U and started to build a collection there. So, I got Breath of the Wild and played. I never finished it on there. That's one I have to go back and start finishing. But I do have one of my favorite stories of gaming ever. So, around that time when it was coming out, it's also shortly after, when I eventually got the system in the game, was after my daughter was born. So she would be taking those little, 2-week-old naps on your chest while I could sit there with the handheld version of, the Wiimote controller, playing it in handheld mode. And I would just be grinding through Hyrule Warriors for hours on end as she slept.
That's cool. I love that story, man. I had slightly similar when my son was a son, my daughter. No, when my daughter was born, I had a very similar thing. I was playing Breath of the Wild. But it wasn't when it was while she was sleeping, so we had you have the eating schedule, right? And I took the 12:30 shift. I can stay up till midnight, no problem. My wife was taking the 3 o'clock. She'd rather get to bed early. So I had 3 hours of time when my son is asleep and I'm waiting for, my daughter to wake up and for feeding. And that was Breath of the Wild time. So that's how I got through Breath of the Wild too. That's very interesting. We had those kind of congruent stories. That's interesting.
Yep. Zelda's there when you need it.
Yep. That's what's cool about the handheld, right? That's cool. Breath of the Wild, are you a fan or?
I actually really do like it. I want to go back and beat it, but I have so much I have to play right now that I know I don't have the time for it, but I do. I'm going to get it for the Switch this time, obviously. And I do want to really play through it again because I really liked it. I put 20 hours in. I still at that point barely touched any of the main actual dungeons or sacred beasts at all. Right. I was still just exploring the world and doing all the little mini dungeons.
Yep. I as someone who really enjoys Fallout and games like that, really drop you in the middle of a place and make you figure it out and just let you explore. Breath of the Wild is probably my favorite Zelda game. And I've played almost all of them at this point, at least the main ones. And man, because there will be a Breath of the Wild episode where I just talk lots of sugar about that game. But yeah, I think you said 20 hours and my first thought was, oh child, oh child. I got 100 hours in and that's when I said to myself, time to finish this game. Because I don't feel like you are done with Breath of the Wild. You don't really finish it unless you get every little, whatever it is,
Deku Nut thing, whatever it was called, or 900 or so things you got to collect and all
The
this
Korok
stuff,
seeds and all that, yeah.
That's Korok seeds, thank you. There's no chance for that. But, yeah, man, I adore Breath of the Wild. This makes me sound very basic as well, but I Breath of the Wild is my favorite. I cannot express how much I love that game. It reinvigorated my appreciation and love for Zelda.
Let me ask you, Bill. Because
yeah.
I love doing this, right? Difference between favorite and best. Like my favorite is Link's Awakening, but I don't think it's the best. I think A Link to the Past is the best because of the reasons that I laid out. I think it is the most recognizably Zelda. And what that means is like what we were talking about earlier. What is good about Zelda? What is Zelda known for? What do people come back to Zelda for? I think all of that is crystallized in A Link to the Past. So, the same in Link's Awakening, but Link's Awakening doesn't have the scope and scale of A Link to the Past. Link's Awakening doesn't have, especially at first, on the Game Boy, it doesn't have the color depth of A Link to the Past in more ways than one. So, it's totally fine. When people say, I don't care if you said Phantom Hourglass is your favorite. It's your favorite for whatever reason. It's your favorite.
Right. And that's.
But would you say that Breath of the Wild is the best Zelda?
That's a very interesting question. And as I was talking about it, I was trying to make that distinction in my head as well. It's certainly my favorite, right? And I know that sounds like it's the newest. It's my favorite. It's genuinely it is genuinely my favorite. Is it the best? When I think about the term best when it comes to Zelda is what is Zelda? Kind of what we've been talking about earlier in this conversation. Like, what is it? Right. And which version of Zelda or which game in the Zelda franchise best demonstrates what the core of the game is. And while that core of the game may differ from person to person, the nuts and bolts are not going to differ. The fidelity is not going to differ. All of that stuff. But I think what a core of the game is, for me, the core of Zelda is exploration, is exploring a world and solving and embarking upon an adventure in an interesting world. And I think given that metric, I really do think Breath of the Wild captures that the best. I Link to the Past is a close second because it is a tighter experience. It's a more curated experience. Where Zelda Breath of the Wild is not. But I think back to what the initial intention of Miyamoto was, and this is like Doki Doki fact, but how he wanted a game to be he wanted a game that simulated the feeling of him in the woods as a kid, just going on these adventures. And I think Breath of the Wild is the fulfillment of that dream. And I think it wonderfully fulfills that promise. It's kind of like the promise of a master fulfilled after 35 years or 30 years at that point of time. So I think I would say, given those metrics, it would be best and favorite. But I can see where someone else's metrics may be different based on, again, what they think Zelda is.
Yeah, I think that there's no argument that the explorative kind of quality of Breath of the Wild, just given its sheer size and how many things there are to do, and the way in which you discover things in that game. You're not just following, icons on a map. You're really discovering things. I think that is unparalleled in this series. There is no.
And I will say, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Say there's no way that any previous game beats out the level of exploration. I guess the difficult thing for me is, exploration is absolutely an integral part of these series, but what other things are integral to this series? And I think there's some people too that had that beef with Breath of the Wild, where they're like, it's missing some of the things that they would come to expect. So that's why the question of what is Zelda is so interesting.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the core things in this conversation and in these first couple of episodes is really kind of exploring, what is this franchise? Again, what does it do well? Do these things matter? What does it mean for you? Like a person, again, I love the personal stories, right? That's what I'm here for. So, what does Zelda mean to you? For me, again, it's always been that kind of exploration. And when I think a lot of people would say, well, there's no way Link to the Past could compete with Breath of the Wild as far as scope. Of course not. It can't. That's an impossibility. But Breath of the Wild has very little fat on it. For being such an open world, there's not a ton of moments where you're just walking around empty plains with nothing to do or look at or admire. So I think if it's the ratio between if Link to the Past as a wonderfully curated experience where every square, right? If you look at it as a square, every square has something cool there or something interesting. And that's for the most part. Obviously there's filler, right? Everything can't be
right.
It's not like a theme park, right? But I would argue Breath of the Wild, if you had a ratio, there's more empty spaces, but it's pretty dang good compared to the rest of the open world stuff. I'm playing Horizon Forbidden West, trying to stay involved because it's too freaking big. I can't do big games anymore. But there's a lot of fat in that game. There's a lot of just open stuff that's just wandering around, and it's pretty. It's very pretty, but I don't have that feeling of there's something cool over there. If I walk far enough, there will be something cool or something cool along the way.
Because there's not. There
so that's just me
isn't.
again.
I mean, like because of the mini dungeons, because of the Koroks, and I might say the Koroks is some of the fat hanging off of. There's
that's fine.
2 billion of those things. And I was like, I'm not
900,
but at least it's something to discover, right? And I remember people saying that, the Breath of the Wild world felt empty, to them. And I think part of that comes from a graphics snob perspective, because like, what is this grass? It's just grass. But it's like, okay, that's not really the same thing as like emptiness. Like they could have replaced it with like a crag, but it's still something that you can't interact with. Besides for climbing, which completely just changes the whole dynamic of these open world games entirely.
Oh, God, I can't go back.
No, you can't.
I can't go back to. I played Fallout New Vegas after I played Breath of the Wild, which is probably a mistake, and I could not stand how I couldn't like hop over a hill, or like, I can climb that. In Zelda, in the Breath of the Wild, I just climb that because if I have enough stamina, I climb it. But we're in like any other open world game, like Horizon Forbidden West is a great example. Climbing stinks in that game. It's boring. Hold up, hold left. So much so that in Horizon Forbidden West, they built in a way where you can just see the wireframes of where the handholds are. So rather than like make them obvious in the environment, you can just see here's all the yellow lines you can grab on, and you literally just follow the yellow lines.
Very gamey.
It's extraordinarily gamey and I look at that, I'm like, but Breath of the Wild did it. They did it.
Can I climb this? Yes.
Yes. If you have enough stamina, feel free to climb it. And who cares? Not to get too far into that, but I do agree with you. Just to kind of put a bow on that. I definitely feel like Breath of the Wild, if people didn't like the openness of it, I can understand that. I think that ties into the themes of the game as well. The sense of loneliness and truly being on your own without a compass. And you have a basic one, right? But just being on your own, underpowered. And I like the idea of these stretches of plains where it feels like there's nothing. You're the only person out there. Again, I think it ties into some of the themes as well. So that's how I would argue that. But I get if someone says, there's just nothing here.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I think.
Yeah, but if you give it 5 minutes, you'll find something.
The dystopian
guaranteed
kind of setting definitely plays into that real well. Absolutely. But yeah, to just agree with you, I think if your primary metric is going to be exploration, I think that is one of the best exploration games I can think of, just pure.
I feel that Zelda games are very similar. They don't really, they iterate, they don't innovate, if that makes sense. Like there's always new things bolted onto Zelda as the years go on and as technology allows, but they're basically the same, essentially. 8 pieces of Triforce, 8 dungeons. Go to the dungeon to pick up the boomerang and hit the spider in the eye with the boomerang, and you win the game.
That's okay.
So here's a question. Do you like that? Do you like that almost comfort food?
Yeah,
or do you prefer when it goes outside the bounds and tries to do something a little different, like Link's Awakening or Breath of the Wild, etc.?
I hate Breath of the Wild because I only played it once.
I know
didn't get very far. I like my Zelda games to kind of follow the same formula. I want my dungeons. I want the way that they always play. I want my heart system. I want things to be the same. It's just
why is that?
Comfort.
Yeah.
Because that's what I expect from a Zelda game. I don't like breakable weapons in general, so I think that was one part of Breath of the Wild, but also Breath of the Wild was so different than what I expected. I mean, I paid $60 for Breath of the Wild, and I never pay $60 for a game, and I expected to get my same old Zelda, and I didn't get that. And that wasn't the same, that wasn't the same for me, because I didn't really watch reviews. I'm like, it's a Zelda game. I know what I'm getting. I'm going to buy it. And then I didn't get what I thought I was getting.
It's interesting because for me, and it'll be a few months before I even get to Breath of the Wild, because that requires its own episode. I loved everything about that game. I'm the exact opposite. I love the fact that I know I'm not alone in this, but I love the fact that it broke free of all those conventions and did something very different,
which is a good thing. I mean,
I think it is. Yeah,
disagree that they need to adapt with change, that they need to try different things. I completely agree with that. For me, I'm fine with the old style.
Yeah, that's fair. That's super fair. And I also think it's interesting that what they did with that game in particular is, I don't know if I can go back to 8 dungeons and 8 Triforce and hit the creature in the eye with the boomerang. Maybe they will, and I hope they do for people like you who enjoy that, who want to have that comfort food. I don't know.
In my opinion, they won't go back because they don't need to. I mean, they open a whole new can of worm with Breath of the Wild, and it's time for a change. And for me, there's always other games that will emulate that style in the indie world.
Sure. Yeah, you're 100% correct.
So I don't care. I mean, there's so many more games I've never played, so I'm fine. But but also things need to change. If you don't change and you just keep putting out the same game every year, Call of Duty, you don't ever adapt. You don't become something great. You just more of the same. So I'm happy that Zelda is changing from what I would have loved. But I still love Zelda. It doesn't matter. I still have every amiibo for Breath of the Wild. Will I ever use them? No, but I have every single one on my table. So.
Up next, we have a brand new voice to the show, Celeste from Another Zelda podcast. I wish I knew about Another Zelda podcast when I was doing my series, because the two of them have a huge wealth of knowledge about the series. And if you're doing a Zelda-specific podcast, you love the material. So super glad I was able to get her on to at least share some of her thoughts about Zelda as a series and share some stories about it. And then finally, Greg Sewart of the Player One podcast and Generation 16 series of videos returns to the show to share some thoughts on the Zelda CDI. Your podcast must be just full of just excitement for Tears of the Kingdom, by the way. I'm sure you guys are just chomping at the bit for it.
We're actually, so I actually talked with David. I said, hey, I'm a very slow player. I'm going to take my time. And he said, that's what I want. He said, I do not want anybody involved on the team feeling like they have to rush. We're going to cover it and get to it when we can. We have plenty of other things to talk about related to Zelda for the episode.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, because trust me, out there will be plenty of people giving their reviews and Let's Plays before us.
Yes, there'll be plenty of people. You're not going to catch the zeitgeist immediately, so you might as well do something thoughtful and curate it well. I totally agree. It's hard to do that sometimes. Not to get into a Tears of the Kingdom or a Zelda conversation, real quick.
I'm okay with it.
I know. I want to pick your brain. I had an idea because we've heard, I think, rumors about Nintendo with the success of the Mario movie now wanting to do something Zelda related, right? Mm-hmm. And I think Illumination might be doing something or planning. There's all sorts of things rattling about. I think a Zelda media property would be best served as a series, like a TV series, where every episode is its individual adventure, animated or
done by a different studio house.
I have to fully agree with you because how do you okay, like let's say they decide to, instead of making a new story, let's say they decide to translate Ocarina of Time to the film or to an animated show. You can't do that in 2 hours.
Can't.
No.
It can't. Mario's different. Mario jumps on Goomba heads and rescues the princess, right? And the Mario movie just does that, and it's great. It's super fun. But Zelda, there's so much timeline. There's so much lore. It's somewhat convoluted based on what timeline you're on. I would love to see different creators who love the franchise just put their own spins on them, almost like a Black Mirror, or I think like the Animatrix. I think it was when the Matrix came out. Like they did stuff like that, where it was just these individual. Every episode is just a different story and a different art style. Maybe someone does like an anime. Maybe somebody does like, I don't know, claymation. I don't know, right? But just let people kind of go wild with the Zelda lore and not worry too much about tying them together, because I think Zelda lends itself to that really well.
It would be beautiful.
I think that'd be so cool. They won't, because, they don't know who's going to listen to me. They'll probably put out. I don't know. I don't think you could do the Mario. I don't think you could do the Mario treatment on Zelda. I just don't think you can.
Well,
I don't know.
Like you played in one of your recent episodes, they just have to do a dance like for that commercial in Japan. Like they just have to. That means
just when in doubt, dance it out. I totally get it. That makes perfect sense.
Like, I mean, the whole Mario Brothers rap, because I'm sure you grew up watching the Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, imagine if they translated that to a Zelda cartoon where they made a Zelda rap.
That'd be so good. I love that. That'd be great. I'd be very much so into that. That's the direction they ought to take. I would love to see like an animated Link's Awakening, right? Like how pretty and beautiful would that be? Have like spend like half of 45 minutes in that world animated in such a way where it's just, Wind Waker style or anything, right? You really could go just get very creative and get some really cool takes on a central theme, and make sure because the central theme of Zelda, of course, is exploration and adventure. And I don't know, maybe an entire animated show where make a 45-minute thing where you just spend the whole time as Link as a wolf from Twilight Princess. How do you deal with that, right? Like, and he can't get out of that, he can't transform back. How do you? I don't know. I'm not a script writer. I just do a podcast. I will give you the high level. I don't know. That was my idea a few weeks ago.
I love that, and I think this is, I'm sure, a very commonly asked question. Just, okay, does it translate better as an animated series or a live action series? I think I'd have to go with the anime style, probably for any of the stories. Yes, there was that teaser in 2008 about that Zelda movie on April Fool's Day. I know you know what I'm talking about. Everybody.
Oh, yeah.
We were all disappointed with it. Was live action, but I don't know. I think any of the Zelda games would be best animated. Now, I have to ask you, Bill, the ultimate question. Do you want Link to talk?
No, I don't think so. I don't. Even in an animated scenario, I think assigning a voice to Link really would take away from in an animated situation, though, like an actual film, like you might have to. But not in a game. I never think it ought to be in the game. I think you have to keep the silent protagonist because I think it allows you to self-insert better. Mm-hmm. And I think to really feel the exploration, I think you have to embody Link and have that experience. And I don't think you need to. In an animated or a film, I think you have to.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be very challenging to do that and get it right. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because I have the Zelda manga and I have the Link to the Past comic, and Link does speak in those. He has a personality, but in the game I prefer it where he's silent. Or I guess he kind of talks, like there are responses. I think in Skyward Sword, like you can choose the responses and things, but he doesn't actually say them. You still have the agency over Link as the player. But in a series, I don't know how they would do it with him not talking at all.
It'd just be really challenging. And
again, I think because in Mario World, you have a template. There is no template. And the best template for a character that's silent is the player's template, right? It's kind of like reading a book. You'll assign your own voice to the characters in your head, and that makes them very personal because they're your voices, right? It's you know, obviously anyone probably knows books are great because you can fill in the blanks. Like the author doesn't need to spell every single little thing out. Readers will fill in the blanks as needed, and that's the fun of reading. It's more personal, right?
Yes.
You attach to it more. And that's I love the idea of the silent protagonist for Zelda because I just think it serves Link better you can self-insert a little easier and go on that adventure and have that more personal connection to the adventure using Link as that kind of that player surrogate. Even though there's a backstory and there's a history and all that, I think you can just identify easier.
I agree.
So yeah, look at I spent too long doing Zelda stuff. I am now talking about Zelda again.
I am not opposed to talking about
I
Zelda
know. I
anytime.
totally get it. Oh, man. It's funny. Zelda's one of those where I feel like I'm just going to keep going back to that well because people love it so much and have that connection. Like Final Fantasy, these Final Fantasy episodes are just going to be chunky. They're just going to be, but I'm okay with that because I think a lot of people connect to these games in a very, very different way of Zelda and Final Fantasy, obviously, just due to the nature of the games. But yeah, I think that's going to be pretty cool.
I always looked at them as Nintendo's find out phase. Nintendo was so, I don't know what the right phrase is here. Honestly, I felt like with Nintendo, it seemed like they wanted desperately to enter the CD revolution. They wanted to say they were. And excuse me, I think that had a lot to do with the fact that, I mean, in Japan, some of their biggest competition was NEC with the CD-ROM drive. And of course, in North America, their biggest competition was Sega, who had their CD-ROM drive coming out. So I feel like they felt they needed to have one, although I don't feel like they had a plan. And the whole series of events that sort of led up to the creation of the PlayStation, where they had to deal with Sony, but then they had to deal with Philips, and then they backed out of that as well. It kind of, the Zelda CDI games just feel like the repercussion. I feel like there's a contract somewhere that says, because they backed out, that Philips was allowed to use these characters. I think I heard something about that recently when I was watching a video as well, where there's some like legal some contract somewhere where it says they were allowed to use like 6 characters or something like that to make games. And of course, clearly 2 of them or 3 of them were probably, they were Link, Zelda, and Ganon, I'm thinking. But yeah, I mean, they always just seemed like they existed based on Nintendo stepping into a deal that they backed out of because they didn't want to go the CD route. And I don't know if that's because they had plans to go the optical disc route until they got the deal with Silicon Graphics for the N64 or what the deal was. But I think, yeah, the remnants of those deals are the PlayStation was launched. Sony basically said, well, we're just going to do it ourselves. And Philips launched some terrible games with Nintendo characters. Because, I mean, there's a Mario game on the CDI as well.
Hotel Mario, right?
Yeah. So I mean, and it's not like Nintendo didn't let their characters out for other games. I mean, on the Super Nintendo as well. I mean, you've got Mario is Missing, sure. And there's another one. There's at least one more as well. So it's not like Nintendo characters hadn't been licensed out to terrible games previously. But yeah,
one of them was like Time Machine. Wasn't it like Time Machine? One of them.
That's what it is. Mario's Time Machine or something
Mario's
like
Time
that.
Machine.
Yeah.
No. So, have you ever played one? Like actually in your hands?
Very briefly.
Okay.
But not enough. I have no memories of it other than, oh my God, this is terrible. I remember seeing the opening animation for one of them. It's pretty famous. It's the one, it's the animation we've all seen now.
Yeah.
A million times.
Sure.
And the CDI was never a good games machine anyway. So, I mean, I guess they did the best they could, but yeah.
It was clearly made by people who had no idea how to play games. I'd argue maybe never had played a video game before.
Right.
Like, they knew the concept of it. Like if aliens came down and said, we're going to make a video game that people like to play and not really understand why they work, but just understand mechanics and sprites and up and down, they may have made that game.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's a shame. And it's a shame, honestly, I think.
Join me, Link, and I will make your face the greatest in Korodai, or else you will die.
Just want to take this opportunity to thank my awesome patrons for their, patronage, as they do. Starting off with Ryan Payne of Gamers Week Podcast, Dan of Retro Logic, Seth Sturgill of the All In Podcast, Julian of Nerds Without Pants, Tim Knowles of The Elitist, BT Goebbels, the Let's Play Princess, Patrice Millette, Games with Coffee, Greg Sewart of the aforementioned Player One Podcast and Generation 16 series of videos, and then finally the one and only fantastic Pete Harney. If you'd like to join these amazing human beings, go to patreon.com/gamerlooks40. Check out the tiers, the things you get, and I hope to see you on that side of the internet. Let's get back into the episode. Now, finally coming out of our Zelda conversation, I'm sure there'll be more coming in the future episodes, Greg Sewart returns to talk more about the CDI as a system. Justin from Killer Quail Studios comes on to talk a bit about Pokemon cards, my son's latest obsession. And then finally, Moses returns to talk about his favorite game. And then I return to tell a story about Chrono Trigger and the magic of retro games. I may have told this story before on this show, but I'm going to tell it again in case you haven't heard it. And then Moses takes that conversation so we can dive into a critique of video game critics.
Yeah, and I think that they're probably indicative of what was going on in the mid-90s, which I'm a big, I'm personally a big fan of the whole sort of multimedia revolution in video games. That's one of the things that I love about video games, and I love about the 90s, that we had so many different game consoles. We had so many new companies getting into video games. We didn't know where full motion video sort of belonged in the video game space, if it belonged at all. And it led to this, I feel like this really exciting and wild few years of experimentation, both in hardware and software. And, most of it, honestly, doesn't hold up. Most of it was garbage the second it came out. But
right.
I think it's important that it happened. I think there were a lot of things that were, a lot of standards that were established based on that, based on seeing what worked and learning what didn't work. And yeah, I think you're right. There were a lot of companies and developers who got into it who only knew that video games were popular and how hard can it be? Right. And, then you had some people who had some characters from an extremely popular franchise dropped into their laps and did their best. So, yeah, I mean, I put those games squarely in that group, where I would say companies like Rocket Science or something that did the Lodestar for the Sega CD or any of those, or even I would say Digital Pictures, although they were way more successful than most, where, and half the library on the 3DO, where it wasn't all traditional game. It was a mixture of traditional games along with sort of experimentation. And the experimentation, like I said, 90% of it didn't work, but it was all kind of exciting to experience at least the first time.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. I remember, going through even, an EGM or a Game Pro, and even just seeing what was coming out was always kind of interesting. Also, I remember a big deal, again, at least Game Pro was my magazine. Again, not by choice per se. It was just what my mom bought. Here I'm talking to an EGM person. I shouldn't.
Are you that meme where you're like asking your mom for EGM and she's like, "We have EGM at home." This is a copy of Game Pro.
I probably did. Well,
I loved Game Pro when I was a kid, so no problem.
Yeah, it's those exploding 5.0 faces.
Oh yeah,
listen, they're super satisfying.
Iconic.
Very iconic. And the pro tip, which is now commonly used in verbiage right now. Pro tip. That's where it came from. So I lost my train of thought. But I know in Game Pro, they always had a section for a little while about systems and consoles and hardware, which was always really interesting because it always felt like, as a kid and as someone who had no disposable income at that time, I'm not going to keep up. Like, how am I going to possibly keep up with the 3DO and the CDI and the Apple machine and the Tiger machine and like all these things that. So I guess to your point, I guess the innovation, everyone was trying to get in on the new hip thing, and like anything that's new, you're always going to have those companies who try to dive in because how hard could it be? Hit up to go up,
Right.
down to go down. Right, come on.
Yeah, no, my experience mostly is when the CDI came out, I had a friend of a friend owned one. Like my best friend worked at the video game shop where I went to rent my games and buy my games.
Mm-hmm.
And they had one customer who had bought a CDI, and I think I want to say Star Control was on the CDI. There was some game on the CDI that was actually a quite good version of that. And so we got invited over to their place to try it out. And that was the limit of my exposure to the CDI. And that it was good. It still didn't play very well because he didn't even have a real controller. He had like the almost like a TV remote, but with a control stick on it.
Yep.
Which was awful. So, but I mean, yeah, that's the CDI. And again, it was a cool thing to see just as much as it was like I owned a 3DO. That was my experimental phase.
Really? You owned a 3DO, huh?
Oh,
Wow,
yeah.
okay.
And, that's why I'm saying I can say with experience that, there was some great games on that thing, but about 80% of the library was garbage. And you had like the Laser Active, and you had all these, the CD32 had all these wild systems coming out. The FM Towns Marty, like, I
don't even know what that is.
Yeah, I was all in on all that stuff. The Apple Pippin, like you mentioned.
Yep, the Pippin, yeah. And the R-Zone. I remember that was
the R-Zone. Yep.
I had a buddy who picked up an R-Zone.
Yep.
I never even could figure out how to make it work. Like, I could not figure it out for the life of me.
And talking about stuff like this, I mean, Sega was licensing out characters and ISPs as well. ISP, that's not the right. What am I trying to say?
Intellectual
IP, ISP, something different. IP's out as well because like the game.com had Sega games on it.
Oh, did it? I didn't.
Them,
Oh, really?
but,
I didn't know that. Okay. Remember game.com? That was the Tiger one, right?
Yep.
Yep. I will eventually have to do a Virtual Boy episode at some point in my life because my best friend had one. So I've put my head into Virtual Boy quite a bit when I was younger,
nice.
And he actually stands by it. He actually will defend the Virtual Boy.
I have a 3D TV in my basement, and I have a emulator box that I want to get working on the 3D TV for Virtual Boy.
Oh, that'd be actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
I noticed, kind of looking at your Twitter and some of the images and whatnot. Are you a big Pokemon person?
Yeah, I am a huge Pokemon person. I have a lot of merch. I have all of the games. I still have my old cartridges as a kid.
Nice. Very nice. I was never a big Pokemon person. When Pokemon first hit, I was almost in college. I guess that was, 98, I want to say?
Yeah, 98. So, like, I was 10, so, like...
There you go.
It was instant only for me, so...
Right in the pocket for that. Yeah, I was like 18, 19. So I was kind of aged out of it by then. Yeah. Not saying you're aged out of it now, but just as like initial interest.
Oh,
and
totally.
my son is 6.
Mm-hmm.
And he was at a summer camp. And he came home and said, "Daddy, I want Pokemon cards. I want Pokemon cards." I'm like, what? Now, I know about Pokemon cards by being in this world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I say to him, I'm like, "Well, I'm thinking about my bank account." Like, well, I don't know. Yeah, so maybe we'll see. The next day, he comes home with 12 Pokemon cards that someone just gave him.
Oh,
now, mind you, I don't know if you're a big Pokemon card person.
Kind of. Like, well,
Okay.
as I said, they were just expensive growing up, so...
Sure.
That was... My mom never would tell. My mom would be like, "Yeah, this is like $5. Sorry."
Yeah. So I'll fast forward the story very quickly. So basically, he came home. So somebody in this summer camp, like a drug dealer, giving him a taste. Here's a taste. So then I'm like, well, Will, if you make your bed and do your chores for a week, I'll buy you like a starter set. He did. So I went. I asked the Twitter community, and they're like, Dan from Retrologic was like, "Oh, you should buy him this Battle Academy. It comes with 3 starter decks and the board and teaches you how to play." He kind of knows how to play the card game. He's okay. He kind of gets it because he's 6, he's reading.
Yeah.
Now he wants to play the game. And I have Pokemon Shield at home. I received it from a friend who didn't want it anymore and gave it to me. So he tried his hand at Pokemon Shield. He needs to be 2 years older, so I don't have to read every line of dialogue in Pokemon Shield for him to play.
Yeah, that's always the fun of like the those kind of games. There's a lot of reading. It's good. It is good for kids because like I have my best friend, his children, like they play Mario Odyssey and stuff. They play the co-op and they read, and it's really cool because it teaches them, you know.
All right, well, that does it for me. I do want to, though, I don't think I've ever shared you this Chrono Trigger story. I have a Chrono Trigger story for you. Just to get the real quota
My tongue
completely
is
out the
tingling.
way. Yes, I think you're gonna get a kick out of this. I was in my family and some extended family all took a trip to Colorado this past New Year's, and they rented out this like monstrosity of a of a Airbnb. It was like this house. They kind of went all out on this trip, this ski trip to Breckenridge, Colorado. And I'm sitting in the game room, which is like this, has like the fancy seats, big screen TV, the whole thing. And every once in a while, I bust out on my 3DS. I throw on some Chrono Trigger. Now I have the, I guess it's the Game Boy Advance or the DS version of Chrono Trigger. And I have a save on there. And I sometimes every couple months I pop it on, I play a little bit, and I'm done with it. I've played Chrono Trigger a bunch. I know it. So I'm playing Chrono Trigger. And my 3 nephews, ages, I guess 8, 10, and 11, I think, if that's about right. And all of a sudden, the 10-year-old starts, what are you doing? Like, and I actually said, "What's that?" to my 3DS. What's that? Like, this young man is a 3DS Nintendo thing. It's not a Switch, a 3DS. He's like, "What are you playing?" I'm playing this game called Chrono Trigger. And it was at the point where you're at Magus's castle, where you're approaching it, you're going against Flea and Slash, and I think those are the characters, and Ozzy. And he just sat there and started watching me play this game. He's like, "What's happening in this game?" He starts asking me about the story, and I'm telling him. His brother shows up, perches behind me on the seat next to me, start watching. They're asking questions. The third kid shows up. My son comes up. Now I have 4 children. They have a big screen TV in front of them. They've played Mario Kart the entire time. When they're not skiing, of course. They've been playing Mario Kart and everything else. Skiing. 4 kids who have never seen a 16-bit game before in their life. Never seen this sort of thing. Entranced into Chrono Trigger. To the point where it was time for dinner, and they're like, "Oh, can we don't play it until we come back so we can watch." They literally they wanted to know the rest of the story. And I'm like, "Kids, I'm not going to, this is like at least a 30-hour game. Like, you're not getting the length and breadth." But it was amazing to me how people will often say, it's just nostalgia. You're just living your past. You're just reliving the glory years of your youth. And it's so much more to that. It's so... Chrono Trigger is just another example of many games that can do this, right? But Chrono Trigger was the one that did it for them. Kids who had never seen a 16-bit game before in their life, gathered around me for half an hour. You can't get kids to do anything for half an hour unless it's something they want to do. And just watch me play. And they're asking questions like, "Oh, what's this? And that's Frog. He's such and such. And that's Chrono. That's my character. And that's..." I'm going to say Marl. I don't know how you pronounce it. Marley. I always said Marley as a kid. That's Marley, and et cetera, et cetera. It was just amazing to me. It kind of it was a proof of concept that these old games, these 8-bit, 16-bit, and forward games have a core quality to them. It's an elemental quality to them that really does survive the generations. So it was a really neat experience for me. It kind of like confirmed my beliefs about retro gaming and why it's so good and why it's so it just permeates the culture throughout the years.
That is a beautiful story. I mean, this is something I'll deal with all the time. Even sometimes from my own writers, who write alongside me, and I'm shocked every time that people who write about games, or people who study games, or people who play games daily, can maintain essentially the attitude that they've heard parroted, I think, really, that We've all heard, it's just nostalgia. We've all heard, rose tinted glasses and things like that. And I think that can absolutely be true. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as nostalgia. That I think is the mistake that some retro heads may try to do. Some silverbacks pounding their chest like, there is no such thing as nostalgia. These are all masterpieces. No, they're not. They're not.
No.
But once you acknowledge for modern games that there is a craft, that objectivity exists, that some games are better designed than other games. And sure, I mean, that risks hurting feelings, that risks, causing arguments. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist because it risks causing arguments. But if a game is just completely glitched out constantly, I don't care how much some hypothetical guy in Nebraska likes it. That doesn't make it a good game. It doesn't make it a well-designed game. It's always like, well, what if a hypothetical person I just invented likes it? Like, first of all, it's hypothetical. Okay, but the point being, if you can afford that for, a modern game, what's that going to be like in 20 years? Like, you're allowing for a game coming out today to be talked about in terms of its real intrinsic qualities, whether they're good or bad. And if you can allow that for a game now, there's no reason why you can't allow that for a game 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. 30 years ago is not a long time. It's not.
No, we discussed that. Yeah.
Technology moves really quickly, and sure, you put the Zelda 1 up next to the PlayStation 5. PlayStation 5 people, and the new Xbox people screaming about frame rates and ray tracing and all sorts of things. It's not any fault of Zelda 1 that there's no ray tracing. It just hasn't been invented yet. That has nothing to do with really the craft of what Zelda 1 is and the kind of experience that allows. And so I think if you start saying it's all just nostalgia, then you've thrown out the craft of game development. You've thrown out people who develop games getting better at developing games.
You've also kind of thrown out the evolution of the art form. We don't say that a movie from the 30s isn't. We don't say that Citizen Kane isn't a fantastic film because it was made 60 years ago, whatever it was. Like we don't say that about paintings. Well, this painting was done in the 16th century. Yeah, it's a piece of garbage.
Medieval paintings, maybe, but come on. I get your point. Like Renaissance paintings are like, I'd like to see. Right. It's like that meme with Sonny from the iRobot movie, where Will Smith's character is like, PC is better than console, and the robot is like, is your PC better than console? Like where it's like, like, this painting is better than that painting because it's newer. It's like, can you do a painting that's better than that because it's newer? There's an acknowledgement of the craft involved and of the individual traits that needs to happen. I mean, I saw some ginormous account saying that one of the most harmful things to gaming was the idea that objectivity exists in criticism. And I was like, oh God, okay,
we're gonna do this.
Yeah, ridiculous.
That's real. Look, people are allowed to like bad things.
Of course,
they just are.
Yeah,
you're allowed to like a bad thing, and that's fine. But we are also allowed to, based off the metrics and common sensibilities we've developed as a people with consciousness and eyes and ears, the rules that we have collectively decided on. Plaids don't go with stripes because our eyes don't like it, because our eyes are not designed to like it. But if you want to wear plaid with stripes, by all means, feel free. And if you do so and make it work, that's fantastic. Yay. That's how art expands and progresses.
People,
You're a genius.
People say, well, art is subjective. All art is subjective. First of all, support your claim. Don't just throw it out there. But if you're going to say all art is subjective, like explain what is happening with games when a developer sits down and literally with math and numbers codes out what is going to happen with a game. Like if you were to watch, a developer design a game, it's not the same thing as Michelangelo painting the ceiling. As it's not. There's still the analogy is there's still the meticulous care and the knowledge of the craft that is comes to fore. But I think that people overemphasize things like music and visuals and story to say, you know, video games are art, but there's all kinds of things like gameplay systems, UI design, you know, like the just simple like systems that need to be in place so the game can run past the title screen.
Yeah, I mean, and there's nuts and bolts to any real art form. I mean, even painting, you know, the science of combining colors, right? Or what type of paint you would use on what type of canvas, and if you're doing like an etching or a lithograph, right? Like all the like the medium, you know, there's all the medium. So you could say that the nuts and bolts of game design, the code, the systems that are all have to be built in order for these things to work. You know, those are the nuts and bolts. Like those are the tools that the artist is going to use to create that work. It's the objectivity thing. Obviously, we are people of a similar
and
ilk.
Final say on that I
in that
have
regard
to say is I realized this recently is so many people will say things like all art is subjective, and will say things like, you know, it's just nostalgia, it doesn't matter, there is no craft, there is no objectivity. They'll say things like that because they don't want to upset feelings. But I realized like my existence in the social online sphere is I really don't care if this hurts your feelings, because it doesn't have to hurt your feelings. It doesn't have to hurt your feelings if I say, you know, this game did not run past the title screen. Like, you didn't make it. If you over obsess about that, that's not my problem. And you can't censor me from saying a criticism for this game just because you like it more than, you know, air.
and critique really should sting a bit. It should. I mean, I've been critiqued. I used to, when I was writing short fiction, I spent a few years in a writing workshop where we would critique each other's work and give notes on short stories, and we were brutal. You know, but the idea being, you know, iron sharpens iron. Like, this is how you get better. Like, this character makes no sense. I could care less about this character. No one was like mean,
That's
like outwardly
right there,
mean, but no one was mean. I'll be honest. I should step back. No one was like mean, but they were brutally honest. Like, if this story didn't work, this thing didn't work. And again, everything, you know, respecting someone's time and the art that they tried to create and the story they tried to write. But that was the point. Like, we're here to get better. So I want you to like give me the straight dope on this story. And I've had people rip my stuff apart. Like, I'll never forget, I wrote an article for Texas Highways magazine many moons ago. And I submitted the article. I was like, just really carefully wrote it. It was like a paid gig, you know? So I'm like really careful. And the editor comes back 2 days later and she's like, so about 50% of this is in passive voice. And you're going to have to change that. And I went, what's passive voice? Like, I didn't go to school for this thing. And when she explained to me what passive versus active voice is, my mind was blown, and I never looked at writing the same way again. I was like, oh my, okay, now I understand. But that was an important note. It made me better. And to say, just one final thing for me is to say that all art is all subjective. Like you're probably going to say is that it implies that my son's scribble from my son's picture of a dragon with a pig head he did 2 days ago is the same as like a Michelangelo painting or a beautiful piece of artwork. You're basically saying those are essentially the same because I may like my son's drawing more because he's my son. I love him and it's connected to me, but you cannot object, because if you say that, you're basically discrediting the work of masters. Like, you're throwing out the hard work and the skill and the genius of people who have worked incredibly hard to create these works. You're saying, well, you don't matter because you're the same as a 6-year-old with a broken pencil. So, and it's so insulting to the art that you claim to love. Like, you love this stuff and you write about it and you post on Twitter.
If you cross that line and really believe it, then you're saying you can't get better. Then you're saying nobody can get better.
Right.
Because there's no such thing as better.
Why bother?
There's no such thing.
Why bother improving?
Such thing as improvement. I've been told there's no such thing as masterpieces because there's no such thing as masters. There's no such thing as craft. Oof. But once you take that, then it's just a bunch of random scribbles. That's how you get to a guy putting a urinal on display. It really is.
Yeah, it's the idea of kind of this meaningless, like all this stuff that that we as human beings are able to do innately. And not to get too heady on it, but like all this creation that we are able to do means absolutely nothing because somebody is gonna like something that's objectively bad. I think that's the crux of it is like I'm allowed to not like the thing you like, even if the thing you like is good. There's plenty of things that are celebrated, games. Donkey Kong Country. I don't like Donkey Kong Country. I don't think it's terribly fun. But that's me. That's my subjective opinion. I'll give you reasons for that. But that doesn't mean you can't like Donkey Kong. You're more than welcome to. It's fine. I don't think it's a great game.
You ever say,
I don't think it plays terribly well.
Like that, and somebody says, why can't you allow me to exist? And it's like, what about my opinion existing prevents you from existing?
I thought I'm meaningless based on your...
if we've reached
all
a
of this
state
is
in
meaningless,
society where a person's... I told somebody this. I was like, if we've reached a state in society where some random dude's opinion on the internet erases your existence, then we've made people way too fragile.
Continuing the conversation, Moses returns to talk about games that endure and why they do so. Trevor and Jeff from the New Dad Gaming Podcast come on to talk about difficulty challenges and the joys of the Switch Rewind, because there are some joys there. And then finally, a brand new friend of the show, Sam from the Retro Logic Podcast, also known as the Third Strongest Mole. I love that handle because if you love Earthbound, you get that reference, and you'll love what he has to say about Earthbound coming up in a few weeks. He comes on to talk about some of his favorite comfort food video games.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like recently, Kirby had an anniversary. I think it was 30th. And I was like, name a bad Kirby game. Like not a meh Kirby game, not a middling Kirby game, but like a straight up bad Kirby game. And people were like, Kirby's Dream Land. I was like, it's a great Game Boy game. It's just not a good PS4 game. Again, considering context, considering, what it was meant for. They're like, it's too short. It was like, because it ran on 4 AAA or 4 AA batteries.
They wanted to get it done. And you couldn't save it, so you had to get it done in a sitting.
Right.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Mario is another one that I would say has enjoyed really mainline stuff, has enjoyed really consistent. That one's kind of tricky because there's so many spin-offs, but has enjoyed really consistent quality over time. And Zelda too, for sure. As long running as it is, has experienced really consistent quality. While making some changes. But think about Pac-Man. Pac-Man fell off at some point.
Yeah. They tried to make Pac-Man way more than it was.
Right. You want to talk about lore. I'm sure there's Pac-Man lore that doesn't need to exist. But Pac-Man in all kinds of settings that just don't really make sense. I played some Pac-Man games that are awful.
Sure.
And nothing like that great original arcade game. So they tried, but and then, what other series are even that long running anymore? Well, Metal Gear had its anniversary today. 35, I think it was.
Is it 35? Okay.
Yeah, happy birthday, Metal Gear.
Yes.
Metal Gear is not a great game. On NES. That's the only version that I've played, and man, that's kind of tough. But then when you look at the series as a whole, it's done. It's done its thing. Konami's moved on, Kojima's moved on, and it's over. So it's hard to think of series that are really that long running, and have maintained quality for so long.
The only one I can also think of, and this is that might be an unfair equivalent, but Tetris.
Yeah.
Tetris.
Tetris 2.
There's been
Tetris 2.
Dozens. I don't know. I'm just thinking Tetris, because Tetris is, in my opinion, one of those almost perfect games. And I've said it over and over, but every Tetris sequel has only iterated upon the original formula. It's not really ever improved it.
Right.
They've just built upon top of perfection. And anytime they've tried to like diverge, I haven't played a ton of Tetris likes, but I can imagine it would not be as beautifully balanced. You know, so.
Little spin-offs and things like Tetris Effect really well received. I mean, if you play Tetris on your phone and it's like branded Tetris, then it's going to be Tetris. You'll have a good time. You know, whether you're playing it on the Game Boy or NES or whatever. I always bring up Tetris 2 as like Tetris 2 shows you that Tetris is perfect because Tetris 2 makes all these like a number of changes. I think they don't use even tetraminos anymore. Whatever that is. They're starting to use like all these different sizes of shapes. It loses itself. So every time I play Tetris 2, I'm like, this sucks. And I forget about it, and then I play it like 10 years.
Real Tetris. Yeah. I mean, not to get into it, I will at some point in the course of this episode, I don't think I'll be in the course of this series, at some point I will do a Tetris episode.
There you go.
I have to.
And speaking of playing well, I don't know if your kids had any big barriers they had to jump. Again, no pun intended for a video game conversation. When it came to like actually being able to be good at these things. Again, my son really likes platformers, and again, he's not good at them. So he started with like Yoshi's Crafted World, which is a great beginner's platformer. You put it on easy mode, like you can float through a lot of it, etc. And he was on the Mario, I don't know, dumb Nintendo naming, Super Mario Wii U Deluxe Switch, that thing. Mm-hmm. He played that for a while. It's getting pretty good. He actually got through the first world on his own, which is pretty cool. He did really, I was very proud of him. That's last week. But now he's starting to pick up the older ones. He's playing Mario World. He's playing, like, I don't know if you've heard the show, but he's dabbling in Link to the Past. And these are the things he's picking up. He picked up Donkey Kong Country out of nowhere today. Just a few hours ago, there he is playing Donkey Kong Country, and he's like midway through the first level. Wow! He actually finally got to Candy Kong to save his game today.
That's amazing.
And his problem, I keep telling him this, and it's hard for me to watch him because it's just hard. He doesn't like to lose, and I don't like to lose. He gets that from me. I do not like to lose, and that's what he gets that from me. All he needs to do is learn how to run and jump. If he can figure out run and jump, he will have a lot of these games pretty much figured out for them. I mean, obviously he has more to go, but he'll get through the first 3 worlds of each of these games, no problem. He does not understand the concept of he has to hit one button at a time, not hold Y and then give B the back bump, like he has not figured that out. And I don't know how to teach it to him. And it's very hard watching him fall into pit after pit because it's not run jumping.
Seems like a core.
Did y'all ever? Yeah, go ahead.
No, it seems like a core skill that they unlock because my son was 100% the same thing because he kept needing to get to the next platform, but this one requires, especially in Mario, if not, I think the exact same one, Wii U of all of them. But unless you can run and jump, you're not going to get there. And like you just gotta hold the run, and then you kind of like slip down your thumb, and like no, you just fell again. You got to run, jump, son. Just like
and I don't know how to teach you this. Like, I can't teach you this. I barely potty trained you. How can I possibly teach you a thing I know how to do by instinct? It was very, it was very interesting. And on a relatively unrelated note, my wife, she doesn't play many games, but she grew up playing Mario World. Mm-hmm. So now the 3 of us are playing a run of Mario World. Nice. So we kind of pass the controller off between the 3 of us. Jamie and I are wrecking, and then he's, he holds his own. He's doing his best. Trying to figure out swimming, etc. Nice. And all of a sudden, my son, because his hands get all crazy and weird, he hit all the buttons at the same time, and the switch, the rewind feature popped up for a second, and then went away. My wife's like, "What is that?"
Right.
She doesn't know what this is. So I'm like, Wait till he goes to bed, James. So he goes to bed. I'm like, James, come here. Let me show you something. I'm like, see, you're playing Mario World. You fall into this pit. You die. Oh, man. You hit these buttons and then go back. Her face was aghast. And like, are you serious? And I wasn't sure if it was going to be that's amazing or I hate this.
Right.
The answer was I hate this. She's like, no, this is not okay. Finish the game, die. Like she, so I was dying. She had no idea that existed, and now she lives in a new world.
But she is using it though, right? Because now that it exists, like how can you
I don't
not?
think she will. I don't think she will. I told her just a few hours ago. I'm like, James. So James, did you ever have like Game Genie? She's like, what's a Game Genie? I'm like,
oh no.
Oh, see.
Oh,
see,
boy.
That's a hard life. It's a hard life.
Cut from a different cloth.
Yeah.
Oh man. So, but again, of course, I'm using Rewind to help my son out. He's on the minecart section of Donkey Kong Country.
Oh yeah.
Lord.
Notorious pain in the keister.
Yeah.
So he loses his 3 lives, and I just kind of rewind him back to where he had 2. Do all that nonsense again.
That's like it's really just taking your kid out of the daycare and putting him onto the mean streets. Because like taking taking him from like Mario Wii U, which even if you choose the characters, I think there's the pink toadstool and then the rabbit
Yes.
that they can't even die, which is fantastic, by the way. I absolutely adore.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, like the smaller characters, yeah, the pink one has better jumping, and then the rabbit I don't even think can die from being hit. He can fall off cliffs. The only thing that sucks about it is that they don't get flowers or any of their powers. So, which is kind of a bummer, because, like, of course, like, the kids want to have flowers and, like, shoot out fireballs.
Right.
So, but that type of stuff is phenomenal, I find, because it's just, it makes it more accessible. We can all do it together. You take the easier character, I'll do the hard one. Off we go. Family time, this is great. But then you go back to, like, the Super Nintendo, and, like, that Mario, like, as you said, Donkey Kong, those games are relentless. They're so mean. Like, it's just...
It's Donkey Kong, I like the minecarts in Donkey Kong, and Donkey Kong's not a game I love. This has been well documented on this show in the past. I don't really like Donkey Kong that very much as a game. I don't think it's terribly good. Whatever. It's, again, well documented on this show. But that minecart, I actually like the minecarts. I think they're kind of fun for me. Mm-hmm. But boy, are they a pain in the rear, because I'm watching him do the minecarts and I'm like, jump, 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 like kind of help him along a little bit. And then it gets to after the midway point, and all those like carts are stuck in the road, like stuck in the tracks.
Yes.
Like, oh, this stinks. Like, this is brutal. And he tried it again 5 or 6 times, just missing it.
Yeah.
But that's when I employed Rewind. I'm like, I'm not going to make you go through the terrible boss. And all the rest of it.
That's when they start seeing patterns, and like, where you can see the code in the Matrix. You're just on autopilot, and you know when things are coming, because
really
you've died so many times. But yeah, those can be pretty brutal. And again, I've been traumatized from the Battletoads.
Sure.
Highway one, whatever that one was. I think that was just meant to break you. And I don't think I ever passed it without a Game Genie.
I can't imagine how you would.
There's like that, and then the Ninja Turtles for Nintendo.
Yeah, no.
It's like, who is this for? Like, who enjoys this? This sucks. Like, what an awful game. And then as a responsible parent, are you really going to subject your loving, dear kids to this? Like, I should hope not. This is kind of another, we'll kind of get back on track a little bit, but I purchased the Cowabunga collection,
right?
Of course, as I think everyone should. It's really good. He loved Shredder's Revenge. That was like a big tipping point as far as the game goes, because he was playing Mario and not doing well. He did perfectly fine playing with me in Shredder's Revenge.
Nice.
And that was one of the things one of my guests kind of not push, but really pushes what is play with them, and they'll want to play more. When it's a solitary thing, they can kind of get stuck in their own heads.
Yep.
But that is what was 100% true, because now anytime he plays anything, he wants me to play with him. It's like, oh, Daddy, can we play Link to the Past? Or can we play Link to the Past? Seriously, he's not good at it, but he wants to play it. Yeah. Or Daddy, can we play Mario World? Or it's really cool. You know, I think that was a big unlocking moment for us as well in this last like 3 months of him getting his games back. But anyways, with Cowabunga Collection, I went to, he's playing Switch. I look over and he's playing that original Ninja Turtles game.
Son, no.
Son, no.
I know. And I had that moment. Like, do I like run over in slow motion and slap the controller out of his hand? Or do I just let him realize this is just not doable? So I let him, and it only took like another 20 minutes. Oh, sorry, we were on a plane. That's why. We were on a plane, and he was, he was probably bored of all the other games on the Switch, so he just clicking around to see what else he finds. Hopefully he didn't play Hades or Limbo. But
Limbo, would be nightmares for sure.
Oh, nightmare fuel. But
original Ninja Turtles. Like, here, son, here's a beer. Just whatever takes it, whatever avoids you playing this thing.
Listen, if you get past this water level with the with the bombs, if you get past this water level with the bombs, you graduated middle school. You're going right to high school. Do not pass go. You're good. You don't need elementary school at all. Do you have any comfort food games where you have a half an hour to kill and you don't want to jump into something meatier, and like a comfort food game where you're just like, this is
just to kill
perfect
time,
for this 20 minutes?
I mean, I would actually say Mega Man. That's not really a kill half an hour a time thing. So one of the things that really, and this is the whole Mega Man, the whole classic series, the whole X series actually, that it was definitely something of a comfort food, because I remember being in college. And the time between exams ending and my dad coming to pick me up and take me home for, Christmas break, whatever. 'Cause he'd usually, at the time he was an accountant, and he had a bank that was in Columbus. I was going to Ohio State. And, so it'd usually be, something that he'd wrap Friday and then drive home with me and take me home. So I'd usually be like stuck in my dorm for like 3 or 4 days with nothing to do. And even other people are like, either they're still taking exams or they already went home. So I would just just marathon Mega Man games. Like, my exams are done. I'm just gonna, I don't know what my grades are yet, right? The grades haven't been posted, but there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm just gonna stay in my dorm and play all the Mega Man games.
That's fun.
So that's probably the closest I would say. Mega Man X is still something I replay like once a year, usually. Super
I think I do the
Castlevania
same.
4 is a big one. I'll usually just play that around Halloween just because.
Yeah, for me it's usually arcade sports games like Ken Griffey Jr. or NHL 94. I'm a big hockey fan, so that for me. And again, as a dad, you grab for time to play stuff, and a 10-minute period, 3 periods of NHL 94 is beautiful if you have 20 minutes to kill. There's one game in particular though that I go back to all the time. A lot of people don't know it. This might be one of my deep pulls. This is a game called The Coin Game. Are you familiar with this?
No.
It's a Steam game. Okay, basically, I don't even know if it's ever got out of early access, but essentially it's a game where you play as a kid and you go to a late 80s, like early 80s or mid 80s arcade, and you just play arcade games, like ticket games.
Gotcha.
So you play skee ball, you play air hockey, you play, all the little grabby games. And the idea is there's like a light story there where I think you can like earn money and, or you earn money from doing odd jobs around the town. You come back and you try to earn more points. I just put it on, I think they literally call it like Uncle Harry's birthday or something, where they give you just $200 in-game money and you just play arcade games. I love playing 15, 20 minutes of skee ball in Coin Game. It's so fun, and it's just this random. I think I paid like $1 for it.
Rusty's Real Deal Baseball on the 3DS.
I don't know that one.
I don't know that one. The like baseball themed mini game collection where you actually like haggled real world money with this dog NPC to buy the games.
That actually sounds pretty fun. Isn't that kind of like, again, I just finished the Zelda series, so half of my brain right now is slowly leaking out of Zelda. Zelda's slowly leaving to the point where I really can't play the new one. I have to give it like a few months because I've just been knee deep in Zelda.
I did actually just think of another comfort food game.
Oh, go for it. Please go for it.
I don't play it as much anymore because I think I've exhausted everything to do in it, but that's Enter the Gungeon.
Wow, yeah.
I play it on Steam primarily, but that is one that I would just fire up when I'm like listening to podcasts or whatever. Like I got to the point where I usually keep the background music muted so I can listen to something else while I'm playing it, and just because it became pretty well ingrained to me, but there was still enough novelty to it because you get different guns every time. It's like, yeah. At one point, I was getting to the point where I was actually chasing the perfect double clone run, just to see how many hearts I could get. Have you played Enter the Gungeon?
I have not, but I know people who absolutely adore it.
Yeah, if you get the clone item, it's an extra life, but it's more than that. It sends you back to the start of the game, but you keep all your items. So if you want to get the most items possible, what you want to do is actually get the clone, clear every floor, and then die on purpose just so you can get more stuff. And there is, although very small, a possibility that when you get more stuff, you'll get another clone.
Wow, okay. Huh.
That's interesting. I've never done it, but I always dreamed about getting two clones in the same game.
I need 2 clones. That's really, really cool. And finally, to close us out, Phoebe, aka the Let's Play Princess, shares a quick story about a tragic moment when a game suddenly became no more. Seth of the All In Podcast talks about his thoughts on the Game Boy and just the intimacy of that handheld console. And then finally, a brand new friend of the show, Joe of the SNES is Life YouTube channel and Twitch stream, answers a moldy oldie version of the 3 questions. Did you have an experience like that in school where you had maybe met some friends or a friend through not just maybe Zelda, but just through kind of that handheld experience?
Actually, yeah. Me and somebody else, I don't remember what game I gave them, but that's actually how I got Link's Awakening.
Okay.
Was cool. From a little swap meet thing at elementary school back in the day.
The elementary school swap meet. I'd love to hear a bit more about that if you can recall it or if it's not a super hazy memory.
It's just me and some other kid were talking about games, and I was like, oh, you have this game, and I've always wanted to play it, and I've been in this game enough times, and again, I don't remember what game it was, but we traded cartridges pretty much.
Yeah, no, I think that was pretty common. I know I did that with friends as well, but I can see it with the Game Boy. They almost try before you trade, I guess, right? You know, sometimes you just didn't know what you were getting into, and you know, I've traded for some games that weren't so great, and I've had games that just didn't come back for whatever reason. Kid moved, or they forgot to give it back, and that happened too. So, do you ever have that happen where you just didn't get a game back?
Yeah.
Kid
Not
moves
with
and
the
you're
Zelda
like,
games, though, but
right.
It was with Final Fantasy 12. I let somebody in high school borrow it, and I never got to beat the game because they borrowed the game, and I want to say the PlayStation 2 sat on top of a stereo system, and their sister entered their room and knocked the stereo over, so the PlayStation 2 falls, and the disc just completely shattered.
Oh no. No, not Final Fantasy 12. Oh, that's hard. That's a shame. That's rough. Oh, did they actually make good on it? I mean, you really can't at that point, but
no, they never are able to. But yeah, it's fine.
And I'd like to talk about the ending and your kind of take on the theme of the game, which I think is very left up to your imagination. I don't think there's a solid answer to this, but. Or there may be, I don't really know, but I have my own theory that I like, and I'm going to hold on to it. Damn it.
Yeah, sure. I think another interesting thing about that is the perspective of playing games in handheld in general. I think that it sort of calls back to like reading a book or something.
Yeah.
Like it's the difference between reading a book and like watching a movie. When you're watching your movie, you're like sat either in the theater or on your couch or whatever, and you're kind of sucked into the screen. Whereas if you're reading a book, it's a little bit more intimate. It's a little bit more cozy.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more in the palm of your hand and in your face. And I think playing games in handheld sort of capture that, and having this little pocket world captures that.
I 100% agree, and intimate is how I always describe that experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, sitting, in bed under the covers, glow of whatever lamp you bought for the for the Game Boy, right? It's not backlit. You have this whatever dumb lamp you have under with a magnifier, and you're just kind of immersed in it. And I think that's why also kids like my son, for example, he'd much rather play the Switch in his hands than on the TV. We play together. We play it on the TV, obviously, and it's great. But when he's by himself, it's always in his hands. Because again, I think it's that immersive experience where it's just you and that screen. And it's also a experience, also like reading a book, where it's almost distraction free. Like the Switch is not going to be, barking notifications at you every 2 seconds.
Right.
This news story, this email, etc. It's just you in that game and that experience. Much again like reading a book. I have a lot of fondness for the Game Boy. You may or may not know, very early on in the show, I did a full Game Boy kind of retrospective. And I want to do another one because the more people I meet, the more stories I hear about Game Boy. And I think it's one of those where if you had one, it symbolized so much. I mean, it was one of those personal things, right? Just like we were saying before with Link's Awakening, it was a handheld thing you didn't have to share. It was your thing, right?
That's
Unless you had
such
siblings.
a big thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
right? It's the ownership. Yeah.
That taps into something that I think is so powerful for kids in particular, and especially for me. Growing up, like I definitely, and I think a lot of kids probably feel this way, like they don't have control of anything. Like everybody else is trying to control me. My parents, my teachers, whatever. Like I don't actually have any agency or any control over anything. So, like, isn't it awesome that I don't have to, be on the TV, or I don't have to have these like restricted times. I just have the freedom to pull this thing out of my pocket and just play a Zelda game in the backseat of the car or whatever it is. And for once, I have a little bit of freedom, and I think I really vibed with that when I was a kid. I think that's a big part of childhood.
You mentioned kind of going off of that topic, and obviously we kind of got them pretty early, so we have some definitely more time to talk about different games. I usually do a 3 questions, but I haven't written my next set of 3 questions, so I'm going to ask you some old 3 questions, just to kind of fill out some times here, because I'm enjoying the conversation, so I figure why not. Here's one of the harder questions I've asked people over the years. You have the ability to summon or conjure up one new entry into a video game franchise. But in order to do that, you must destroy an entire franchise, an entire separate franchise. In order to gain the power to create, you must destroy an entire. But here are the rules. The franchise must have at least 3 entries. Okay, so that DLC doesn't count. So let's say you're not a fan of The Last of Us. Last of Us would not count because there's just 1 and 2. So remasters don't matter, and the DLC doesn't matter. So you could not destroy The Last of Us, nor could you add to it. And depending whatever you destroy, the fans of that game or franchise will know you did it. They are going to know you're the person who murdered Kingdom Hearts. They're going to know you're the person who destroyed Call of Duty. They know your social media. They don't know where you live. That'd be really creepy and weird. But they know you are on the news. Joe from SNES's life has destroyed a beloved franchise. So what game do you conjure up? And mind you, it's a good game. This is like it's not a monkey's paw situation where you conjure up a game and it's terrible. What franchise do you add to the canon, and what franchise do you destroy to make that happen?
So do you want me to create something completely fresh, or just make a company that has ceased doing something I want them to do something?
It's got the only stipulation is it has to be an existing franchise that has at least 3 entries in it.
Existing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, kill Final Fantasy.
You're killing Final Fantasy.
I have zero Zero qualms about murdering.
Wow. You do realize in August, I'm starting an entire Final Fantasy series. You realize this, right? Like, it's going to be 4 months of Final Fantasy.
Again, I can't stand as an adult playing those games because it's get in a fight, take a step, get in a fight, take a step, get in a fight, take a step. And then you finally get to the next area only just to get trounced to realize you have to turn around and fight for another 40 minutes to get to the level to go into that next area.
Oh, that's really funny. So this is like a personal vendetta for you. This is like this is a grudge match situation. It's like Final Fantasy, you gotta go. You gotta go. That's bold. And you realize every Final Fantasy fan is gonna know you did it. Yeah. And you're willing to take those bullets. All right. So you've now destroyed Final Fantasy. There's no more arguing over Ares or Aerith versus Tifa. None of that. All that's gone. It's all just disappeared. And now, what do you create? What game what franchise game do you create?
I would like to get Konami out of their pachinko machines and start pumping Castlevania
Ooh, so you want another Castlevania?
I would like them to go back to the late 90s and make good Castlevania games a la Symphony of the Night style, or even to the original NES style. You know, just the good old action platformers.
Interesting.
Because the 3D Castlevanias were all awful. And then they just kind of buried it and let it sit.
Well,
and it's such a good franchise.
It's a great franchise. The 3DS ones are pretty good. Some of the DS ones are good. I played Aria of Sorrow, which I think is very good, and there's another one of Sorrow. The games, all this Castlevania 3DS and DS games have these very epic gothic names. I don't remember. I played a couple of them. I thought they were good. Yeah,
Aria, Portrait of Ruin, and Harmony of Dissonance were all Game Boy Advance.
Gotcha. Oh, okay.
And
yes.
And those, in my opinions, were the last good ones.
Gotcha. There's one I played for 3DS, I think, or DS. I can't remember which, but anyway, it's those games are fun, but another Symphony of the Night. I mean, Symphony of the Night is of course just unassailable, and actually, here's the question then: which of the 2D traditional Castlevania games do you like best?
Honestly, I kind of enjoy the original.
Really, the original NES.
Yeah.
Not cool.
It's an awful choice in the end.
It's fine. I mean,
if you ask me which one I would ask, if someone asked me what should they play, I would probably point them either towards Symphony or Aria. But personal love, just that original Castlevania, the music in it, the gameplay, the horrible stiff jumps and those goddamn Medusa heads.
Yep. All those bad memories. Yep.
Yeah, it triggers the nostalgia, something fierce.
That's cool, man. No, that's cool. Let's do another easy one. So you are tasked with, Mount Rushmore. We've all heard the Mount Rushmore question, I'm sure. What's your Mount Rushmore of this, Mount Rushmore of that? You are now tasked with actually destroying Mount Rushmore, taking our founding fathers off the face of that rock, and putting 4 video game characters up on that peak. What 4 video game characters do you plaster upon Mount Rushmore?
I mean, you can't not have Mario, right?
Of course not. Gotta have it.
Mario's up there. Gotta be. Second, Mega Man. I love Mega Man. And I'm not actually good at the Mega Man.
Really?
But so I did Retro Game Brews, who you've had on the show. He did the RGB High Score Challenge. In the past, and I participated in the Mega Man 2. So I can sort of speedrun Mega Man 2. I can beat that game in about 40 minutes.
Wow.
But I'm god-awful at all the rest.
That's so funny. Mega Man 2 is a good one to be good at. That's like top S-tier Mega Man right there. So
third, I think I would have to probably go with Master Chief. He just really defined that generation, I think.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm a little torn, honestly.
Okay.
I think just to try to be fair and representative, I'll put something I can think. You know what I remember from PlayStation is Crash Bandicoot. And I think Crash never got enough love. And I know he isn't like a Sony exclusive.
Right, yeah, but still he was kind of the face of Sony for a while when PlayStation was first coming out. He was kind of their unofficial mascot, even though, wasn't
those commercials with him outside of Nintendo with the bull phone. What's wrong, plumber boy?
Yeah.
Those were great.
So you're saying Crash, but you were between Crash and something else, I think.
Zelda.
Oh, Zelda and Link. Yeah, Link. Link's a good choice.
I mean,
it's hard not to.
And I think Link is a choice that most people would make. But to me, Mount Rushmore, for me, I'm thinking of a character that is defining of a system or a time period.
Generation.
And Mario is Nintendo.
Of course.
He just is.
Yep.
And so just trying to say, to not be like Nintendo's up there twice.
It's fair, but you also haven't you haven't put Sonic up there. So is there a little bias? Are you still fighting the Bit Wars? Are you? I was always a Sega. I was a Nintendo kid, so I never had a Sega. So I get it if that escapes your brain a bit. But
so I had a Super Nintendo, but my best friend had a Sega.
Gotcha.
And after I think, say Sonic 2, that was really Sonic's best outing.
Oh yeah, Sonic 2 is phenomenal.
I've never been impressed with any other Sonic game, honestly.
Okay, this will be the final one. So you are on the game show Jeopardy, and you've gone through single Jeopardy, fine. Double Jeopardy, pretty good. Some rockiness, but you're okay. You're still in there. And we're at Final Jeopardy. What video game category would you love to see come up in Final Jeopardy? And which one would you hate to see come up? Where you came up and you're like, I'm doomed. No chance. It's over.
Anything to do with JRPG.
So JRPG, yeah.
I know nothing.
That's it. JRPGs, you just make something up to make the audience laugh and say $0. Yeah. I'm riding or dying on this failure.
I would fall apart on that category without question.
Now, which category would you love to have show up? Where you're like, I got this. Bet it all.
Probably light guns.
Light guns? That's extremely specific. Why light guns?
I love light guns.
Oh, cool. Okay.
The light gun era is what brought the arcade home to me.
Oh, totally.
So some people say that what brought it home was, Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter because they were such huge games. But to me, it was the giant machine with the ridiculous peripherals that, made you really feel like you were part of the game. So at home, I have a huge collection of light guns for my console.
Oh, cool. Right on, man.
And... I have the NES Zapper, the Konami Laser Scope, which is the weird headset one that you yell into. I have the Super Scope, the Menacer, the Silent Scope rifle for the Xbox. The Justifiers for Lethal Enforcers, all the gun cons for the PlayStation.
Oh, wow. That's cool. I didn't even realize there were so many for the later systems.
Yeah, there were. PlayStation 3 and the Wii is where the light gun genre died out.
That's so interesting. Wow, I didn't realize they made it for PlayStation 2. That's crazy. Were they first party peripherals or are they kind of third? I guess they had to be first party.
No, they're third.
Okay.
So Namco made all the gun stuff for the PlayStation.
Gotcha. Okay.
And Konami put out a Justifier for the PlayStation 1. I don't think they made one for the PS2.
Okay.
So Namco made the gun cons for the PS2 and the PS3. And then for the Wii, the Wii remote is essentially a light gun.
Basically, yeah. Right.
It's just companies made, attachments
totally.
to put your Wiimote in.
So
but the nice thing is that because of that, they ported a ton of light gun shooters onto there.
Sure. They sure did. I think there was a Resident Evil on-rail shooter for the Wii, I think. That wasn't...
Two of
yeah,
them.
there was just... I remember I owned the first one. It wasn't half bad. It was actually a pretty decent light gun game.
Yeah. So there's Dark Side Chronicles, which is kind of replaying bits and pieces from multiple games.
Right.
And then there's the Umbrella Chronicles, where you start off as like a prisoner on a train on its way into Raccoon City when it happens and the outbreak occurs and your train wrecks and it's wild.
Cool, man. I gotta check those out. I'd have the first one. I have to blow the dust out of the Wii and find it in the garage and plug that back in. Yeah, I remember them being pretty fun. Thank you so much for listening to this extra long episode of A Gamer Looks at 40. If you enjoyed the show, check me out on Twitter at A Gamer Looks at 4040. There's a link tree in the bio. All my everything is there. Connect with the show and come hang out. Discord's there as well. It's a fun environment.
I do liner notes for every single show, so you get some behind-the-scenes info on how these things are made. It's a good time with some good people. Definitely check it out. Thanks again for checking out the show, and until next time, just be kind to each other and yourselves.